Hello, my name is Christy. I'm an editor, beta reader, and ghostwriter, and today I'm going to do a quick edit of one page of Blood of Hercules by Jasmine Mas. Now, I've read and watched reviews of this book, most rather negative, especially regarding world building and prose. Every great fantasy should feel alive, full of logic, culture, and consequence. But too often, writers create settings that sound like encyclopedia entries rather than places real people could live in. In this video, I will take a look at a passage that struggles with passive writing, missing context, and broken world logic, and I will show you how to fix this. You'll learn how to turn lifeless exposition into mythic storytelling that flows and makes sense. What you'll learn: how to replace passive voice with active, purposeful narration, how to build causal links that make your world believable, how to introduce civilizations and myths that feel cohesive, the difference between history book writing and immersive storytelling. The small snippet from the book is used for commentary and educational purposes only, so fair use applies. Let's get right to it. I picked the chapter called The Great War, which seems to be the second chapter but reads like a prologue, following the prologue in the first chapter. I honestly don't know why there are two of those and they are not labeled properly. Thus, the structure of these first two chapters is a bit confusing. That's incidentally the first issue with this book. If the reader cannot immediately tell whether they're reading the story proper or a prologue, then your writing is too vague and not serving its purpose. You don't want to confuse your readers. Over-explaining is definitely a thing, but lack of description is just as bad, and one of the main issues of current romantasy literature. Keep that in mind during the rest of this edit. Okay, this is the page that we will be looking at. Eons before humanity was born, the state of Sparta was spread across thousands of archipelago islands in modern-day Greece. Sparta was composed of 100 immortal Spartans, their animal protectors and local creatures. Creature was a blanket term Spartans used to classify all races of civilized people who had special powers but weren't Spartan. Ruled by an oligarchic federation, Sparta's immortal citizens were content to live quiet, slow lives of island luxury. They knew nothing of conflict, greed, or jealousy. All was peaceful. Then humans arrived. Humanity was in immediate awe of the immortal people. Sparta taught humanity art, agriculture, and governance. Humans worshipped them. Thus, Spartans became humanity's gods. The first thing I noticed is the formatting. Half the ebook page is taken up by a picture of a pillar, and the rest is chopped into one-sentence paragraphs. That kind of visual padding doesn't create drama. It just highlights that there's not much substance. I know that sounds a bit harsh, but let me explain. I'll start with the developmental edit, that is, questioning the text's internal logic. Let's begin with the first paragraph. Eons before humanity was born, the state of Sparta was spread across thousands of archipelago islands in modern-day Greece. Yeah, that's inaccurate. Historically, Sparta wasn't a state, it was a city-state, located in Laconia on the Peloponnese Peninsula. Okay, this might be a fantasy version, but the author explicitly says modern-day Greece, which anchors the story in our world. Then we've got Sparta was composed of 100 immortal Spartans, their animal protectors and local creatures. Creature was a blanket term Spartans used to classify all races of civilized people who had special powers but weren't Spartan. Now I've got some questions. First of all, what's the time frame? What are eons in this context? How is it possible that this state that included all races of civilized people evolved before humans did? Why do these Spartans use a name that has a traceable etymology, that is clearly of Indo-European descent? Also, composed is just a bad verb choice, making it look like the state itself is made up of these 100 individuals, instead of being populated by them. Words have meanings, and the more precise you are, the better. Let's continue. Ruled by an oligarchic federation, Sparta's immortal citizens were content to live quiet, slow lives of island luxury. They knew nothing of conflict, greed, or jealousy. All was peaceful. This doesn't make any sense. If the Spartans were the immortals with powers who gave this vast state that contradicts actual history its name, then how come they are ruled by someone else? Who is this oligarchic federation? What does that even mean? Are they supposed to be the Spartans, but the author worded this in a confusing manner? If there is an oligarchy, there needs to be a lower class. Are they peaceful and happy? How can you have an oligarchy but not know what greed is? These questions might sound pedantic, but look, your world needs to make sense. I know that this is fantasy, but the world still needs to be consistent and feel like it could actually be a place where people live. If your first description just makes your readers scratch their heads, then you didn't do your job. This is sloppy, first draft writing that makes it impossible for me to immerse myself in this universe. The last few sentences of the snippet are: then humans arrived. Humanity was in immediate awe of the immortal people. Sparta taught humanity art, agriculture, and governance. Humans worshipped them. Thus, Spartans became humanity's gods. Where exactly did the humans even come from? I thought they hadn't evolved yet. Did they migrate? Did they spring from the ground? What were the cultural norms and expectations that led them to be so deeply awed by these Spartans? Why are they so impressed anyway? What were the humans like that they didn't know anything about art, agriculture, and governance? And most importantly, why did the humans worship them as gods? Didn't they already have gods? What's the context? None of this provides enough detail or even cohesive structure to convince me that this is a lived-in world. The author writes, thus, Spartans became humanity's gods, as if this were a logical conclusion, perhaps the only one, but that's not true. Okay, so what about the writing style and grammar? If the writing lacks internal logic, odds are it isn't particularly good on a technical level either. So let's tackle that. Eons before humanity was born, the state of Sparta was spread across thousands of archipelago islands in modern-day Greece. The first sentence alone is clunky and misleading. It's trying hard to sound lyrical, but fails on a few levels. First of all, it's way too long and winding. One of the most common issues I see in manuscripts are sentences connected by commas and conjunctions, when shorter is usually better. Be as precise as possible, and your prose will become invisible. That is, people will be able to immerse themselves in your story and your world. So, how do I fix this sentence? First, I would get rid of the passive structure that makes it look like nobody is in charge of anything. Let's turn "the state of Sparta was spread across thousands of archipelago islands in modern-day Greece" into "many thousands of years ago, Sparta's territory was vast. It sprawled across countless miles, spreading its influence across great swaths of the Peloponnese." That fixes the historical inaccuracy and clears up the confusion brought on by "in modern-day Greece," which made it sound like the story takes place in said modern-day Greece. We still have to include the humans into this because the information is important. What we need to do is be more specific, as always. How about "many thousands of years ago, before the dawn of humanity, Sparta's territory was vast. It sprawled across countless miles, spreading its influence across great swaths of the Peloponnese." But now we've got too many prepositional phrases and repetitions, so we need to trim the prose and tighten it up without losing any of the conveyed information. I've got "thousands of years before humanity's dawn, Sparta's realm was vast. Its power stretched over much of the Peloponnese." I deleted the repetitions, but kept the more lyrical quality the author was going for. Next we have "Sparta was composed of 100 immortal Spartans, their animal protectors and local creatures." Creature was a blanket term Spartans used to classify all races of civilized people who had special powers but weren't Spartan. Apart from the logic issues I talked about earlier, this is just not well written. It reads like a laundry list, more like a book report than an actual book. It also doesn't match the prose style of the previous paragraph. So once again, let's tighten up and make it snappier. How about Sparta was home to 100 immortal warriors, their spirit-bound beasts, and the many races they called creatures, being of power and mind, yet not of Spartan blood. The text is less meandering and more focused. It also emulates the style of a story being told around a campfire. I did something similar with the prologue in Audra Winter's Age of Scorpius, as that passage's purpose was also to convey oral history in a fantasy-appropriate style. The description is more evocative and sounds less like a Wikipedia entry. We're telling a story, and every story has a purpose. Nobody cares about a dry description. Please don't be afraid to employ the em-dash, which has been a useful tool for literally centuries and has nothing to do with AI. Okay, the last bit needs some reworking, not only because the author uses way too many passive constructions, which flattens agency, but also because, like I already mentioned, it doesn't make much sense, lacks consistency and a causal link, and just, again, sounds like an anemic Wikipedia entry. How about this? Sparta's immortals govern themselves through a council of equals, a quiet dominion built on order rather than conquest. For ages, they lived in peace, tending their land, perfecting art, craft, and thought. Once the first humans crossed the sea to their shores, they came as wanderers, hungry for knowledge. The immortals welcomed them, teaching what they knew, how to sow the earth, shape stone, and govern. In time, awe turned to reverence. The humans built temples in their honor and spoke their names as prayers. Thus, the Spartans became gods not by decree, but by the devotion of those they had lifted from darkness. I've expanded the description somewhat and added much needed connective tissue that provides a causal link between all of the statements being made. Now, the whole page reads like this. Thousands of years before humanity's dawn, Sparta's realm was vast. Its power stretched over much of the Peloponnese. Sparta was home to 100 immortal warriors, their spirit-bound beasts, and the many races they called creatures, beings of power and mind, yet not of Spartan blood. The immortals governed themselves through a council of equals, a quiet dominion built on order rather than conquest. For ages, they lived in peace, tending their land, perfecting art, craft, and thought. Once the first humans crossed the sea to their shores, they came as wanderers, hungry for knowledge. The Spartans welcomed them, teaching what they knew, how to sow the earth, shape stone, and govern. In time, awe turned to reverence. The humans built temples in their honor and spoke their names as prayers. Thus, the Spartans became gods, not by decree, but by the devotion of those they had lifted from darkness. Is it perfect? No. This is just a short demonstration of a first round of editing. I usually do the developmental part of the edit before anything else, because I need to talk to the client about their goals for the story and the characters. It's easier to fix style and logic issues once you've cleared up questions about the story per se. But the short excerpt shows how much work goes into crafting a good story. I haven't read the rest of this book yet, but I plan to do so and maybe record a longer review, focusing on what I would alter as a developmental editor. For now, I just wanted to demonstrate that the more you question and deconstruct your writing, the better the results will be. The main questions you should ask yourself are: does my writing make sense? Is it logical and consistent? Is it contradictory? Is the prose evocative? What emotions am I trying to convey without being too on the nose? If you keep these basic questions in mind, you'll find it easier to write a story people will actually enjoy. Oh, and please, don't use the real world as a backdrop for your story and then get basic facts entirely wrong. It's sloppy, it's annoying, and I think we all deserve better. Writers should strive to be as good as possible. Standards should be higher than this. I honestly don't care if this sells well. We all need to hold ourselves to a higher standard and have some pride in our craft. Raise the bar, as it were, not contribute to an endless sea of mediocre slop. I'm sure this book could be molded into something at least competent, but judging from what I've seen in these first 2 chapters, nobody cared enough to try. And just as an addendum, no, the Spartans had nothing to do with the foundation of Rome, just so we're clear about that. Okay, thank you so much for watching. If you like what I do, please check out my first video where I edited the Age of Scorpius's first paragraph in depth, constructively and staying away from the drama surrounding the author. Thank you, and I hope to see you around for more pedantic editing of controversial works of literature.